The balanced data slate is here for December, and oh my, this is going to massively shake up the meta. In this overview, we're going to take a look at the highs, the lows, the winners and the losers, and everything you need to know in order to play Warhammer 40,000 going forward in this new era of Warhammer 40k.
The December balanced data slate is finally here. Some of you are on a naughty list, but some of you are also going to be receiving some buffs from Grotmus, Calendar and Michael. We're going to be taking a look at this balanced data slate as a whole. We're going to see the impacts it's had on each individual faction, as well as some of the overarching changes to the game itself. Where do you want to start when we're taking a look at this?
So first of all, I want to say a massive thank you to Games Workshop for, of course, providing us with some preview access to some of these changes, but also for providing some much needed balance to the game of 40k and some buffs, actually, to factions who really need it. So these changes are massive. These are much bigger than the October changes we had recently, and they will definitely be influencing the game as a whole. So we'll start with the cross-faction stuff, the core rules changes.
Yes, and there's a few, isn't there? There's not a lot, but there's a couple of big, massive universal impacts. Now, the first one, 3-inch deep strikes are no longer a thing, are they?
They're gone.
They're gone.
The 3-inch deep strike is dead and buried. So any stratagems that let you deep strike 3 inches away from your opponent are now 6 inches away from your opponent.
Yes, and something that obviously we'll go through when we come into individual factions as well. Data sheets have been amended, so things like Inceptors, for instance, they have been changed to be in accordance to this as well, because it's not a stratagem, it's a data sheet ability.
Exactly, exactly. So all of those units you know and love, like the Aquilons, they're all 6-inch deep strikes now. And I've got some thoughts on that, but we'll discuss them later, perhaps. Yeah,
we'll do some overall thoughts at the once we've gone through this section, but there are more changes, aren't there?
There are, yes. So there is a universal change to any Armour of Contempt style stratagem. So anything that reduces incoming AP. Instead of being until the end of the phase, it's now until that activation's finished.
Right, this is massive, right? Because Armour of Contempt is littered across 40k, especially amongst the Marine factions. Every single detachment from a Marine faction has this stratagem. What impact is this going to have in terms of gameplay?
Okay, so there's two aspects to this. I personally don't like the change. We'll talk about it later. So the main impact is that some of those units that are very difficult to kill already, Terminators, specifically Deathwing Knights, let's be real, these are going to be less uninteractive than they were previously. It's not going to be, oh, I can't kill this unit with my entire army because they're reducing that AP. It's more like, okay, well, the first unit going in is not going to do much damage, but at least now I can invest the rest of my army and actually kill the unit that I'm trying to kill.
Yeah, I guess as well, like as a Marine player, both of us have been in this instance, you already know before shots have been fired, I need this unit alive, so I'm just going to play Armour of Contempt on this unit for the turn, and you just wait for the first activation and go, boom, I'm going to play it, right?
Yes.
That's kind of just how your mentality has been with this stratagem. But I think I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not a massive fan of the change, and I know we're Marine players, but I think what this might lead to now is, I mean, there's certain guns out there that might just be able to do chip damage beforehand, and you're going to have to play this when you really need it on that profile you know you need Armour of Contempt on. It could lead to some weird interactions then on the table with this stratagem, right?
It could, yes. The main thing that this stratagem change is going to affect is actually Space Marines, obviously, but 3+ armour saves really need Armour of Contempt to stick around. When you don't have an invulnerable save, all of those squads with 3+ armour saves that are Space Marines actually fold very easily.
Yeah.
And they are really going to suffer at only being able to use this against one shooting attack.
Yeah.
I actually would have preferred if they'd made it impossible to use this on a 2+ armour save.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a bit more balanced. But they've gone this route, and we'll have to see how it goes. And you never know, they might change it in the future.
Yeah, I guess as well, there are some spicy AP buffs for certain factions in this balanced data slate. So with Armour of Contempt coming down and AP going up, for Space Marines in particular, actually, it's kind of a weird trade, isn't it?
It is, because we benefited from the AP being reduced against us, but we also suffered heavily at people reducing our AP.
Yeah. Well, we've just discussed how we feel about the change to Armour of Contempt in particular, but you also mentioned you had some feelings about the 6-inch deep strike, right?
Yes, yeah. So hot take, I don't think you even bother anymore.
No.
If the unit ability is now a 6-inch deep strike, because there's a lot of plays where you could take objective markers or you could stop someone from moving, and if you weren't able to screen that, then you were punished for it. But it was a way that some armies were able to play the game more competitively.
Yeah.
So obviously Aquilons were very strong. I'm not going to disagree with that, and obviously have been very cheap. However, it was a way that Guard had to sort of slow the enemy down.
Sure.
And it could have been impacted by points rather than necessarily being taken away completely. However, at the same time, a 6-inch deep strike doesn't get you onto objective markers.
No.
And it doesn't really get you into the corners of the board either.
No, it doesn't have. So I see what you're saying is in terms of its usefulness on a tabletop. 6-inch is not really going to impact the game massively. And there might be situations where it could come up. Like, for instance, if your opponent has tiptoed on the other side of an objective, you may still be able to fit one model on, right? But it's not. It's very rare that this is going to come up, whereas a 3-inch deep strike, like you said, you could punish your opponent for being maybe sloppy, right, with their plays on where they move models.
Yeah, so if you've got stratagems, it's not going to cost you anything from the get-go in list building. So sure, that opportunity might show up, and it's nice to have, but it's not worth spending the points on units that can deep strike 6 inches away, because you might as well spend points on doing damage.
Yeah.
Or landing 9 inches away and doing more damage.
Well, we've gone through the universal changes. Not many, bear in mind, but there are some massive impacts. And we're actually going to fast forward to Space Marines for our overview here, because they've had some major changes which will impact other factions like the supplement factions as well. So I feel like it's important that we start there.
Yeah.
And then we can go alphabetical order from that point. So let's start with Space Marines. What's the first change we're going to look at?
Oath of Moment. Okay, so Oath of Moment, if you are not playing a supplement chapter, so Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Dark Angels, Deathwatch, and Black Templars, I think that's all of them.
Yeah.
So if you're playing a normal Space Marine chapter, then you get +1 to wound against the Oath target as well as your rerolls to hit, which is very, very good.
Codex Ultramarines is back, right?
Codex Ultramarines is definitely back. I mean, look, Lieutenant Titus has come out for match play.
Yeah.
You got 5, 6 named characters now. But in general, Space Marines, that's going to definitely help them a lot.
Yeah, I think their win rate is definitely going to be going up after this, because +1 to wound is massive, but just being able to get it just by looking at your opponent, there's no interaction here needed. You just go, I want that unit, and that unit is going to be suffering +1 to wound. I mean, does this actually interact as well with Guilliman's ability, where he gets to pick 2?
It would, yeah.
Yeah, so you could effectively have one unit, you go +1 to wound with Guilliman, and just go bang, that unit's deleted quickly, and then you resort to your second Oath of Moment, and you still got +1 to wound on them.
Yeah, Guilliman's looking good.
Yeah, he's looking very good.
Very good.
Yeah, and there are changes as well to him, so we'll come to them. What's next?
Fire Discipline.
Oh no, everyone's most feared enhancement.
Yeah, so it's lost critical hits of 5. So it's nowhere near.
I'm not scared of that anymore. Yeah.
What you do get is to reroll advances when you've got Dev Doc going.
So, and obviously Dev Doctrine gave you Assault, so that means now you can advance and you get a reroll on your advance.
Yeah,
so
just nice.
It's still something, I mean, it gives you sustained hits still, so I still think you'll see it, but it's not going to be nearly as oppressive, and you're not going to see the combination start popping up as well with like Eradicators, Aggressors, all these things we've seen over the course of 10th edition, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sustained hits and lethal is still nice. It's just not as auto-delete as it was before. So next we've got a couple of unit changes. So the Gravis Captain has +1 damage on his bolter, like his regular bolter rifle.
Okay, so flat 3 damage now.
You probably weren't taking it anyway, but
no.
Hey-ho. Heavy Intercessors also have +1 damage on their bolt rifles.
Massive change there, right?
Which could be very interesting. It could be very interesting. Their heavy bolter as well now hits on ballistic skill 3+.
Which makes sense. I mean, I know you said it off camera to me, is they are in Gravis armour. Exactly. They should be able to wield a heavy bolter with reasonable skill, right?
You played Space Marine?
Yeah, exactly.
You can still move while shooting that thing.
You can run with that thing.
You can run with that thing. So other than that, there are some other huge unit changes. So Infernus Marines get an AP on their Pyre Blaster.
This is huge.
I'm very excited about this.
Yeah.
Those Salamanders are looking a bit spicy.
Yes.
Especially when we come to some of the character changes. In addition, when Infernus Marines shoot now, when they force that battleshot check against infantry, it's at -1.
Which is good. I mean, we've discussed it plenty of times on the channel. If you can get battleshock being forced at -1, then it's good, because -1 is actually very impactful on a battleshock test or a leadership check.
Yeah.
So having that available to you when you're shooting with these things just increases the odds that they're actually going to fail the battleshock test.
Exactly, because a lot of leaderships are 7+.
Yeah.
So now that it's 8+, it's below average
Yeah.
to pass that. So you're now more likely to fail it than pass it. Inceptors Very simple change, 6-inch deep strike.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier. It's just going to be a universal change throughout all the
I
codexes.
just hope they go down in points.
Yeah.
Playing 130 or whatever is crazy.
Yeah.
Normal intercessors. These have a very cool rule now. So they can, if they all target the same unit with their shooting attacks, they can add 2 to the attacks characteristic of their bolt rifles.
Okay, so 4 shots per bolt rifle, AP1, 30-inch range.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, right? I mean, this actually gives them a damage aspect. Before they were relatively useless in terms of all they did was sticky objectives. That's all you took them in a list for. Now you could use them to clear chaff.
Yeah, exactly.
Or T3 armies, right?
Exactly. So you can, and because it got assault and heavy and all that, so you can advance up, you can fire a bunch of your shots, and you can take objectives because they're OC2. So they're actually a lot more interesting now.
Yeah, I think definitely I'm looking at putting some in my list after that change as well.
Outriders. These are worth talking about.
Yes.
So when they charge now, instead of the auto advance 6, they're going to get on the charge +1 strength and +1 damage to their melee attacks.
Oh, mama. That's pretty good.
So 4 attacks,
yeah.
strength 5, AP1, 2 damage each.
I mean, it's very interesting to look at them. If we look at them in Blood Angels, strength 7, AP1, 2 damage. It's not bad with 5 attacks each.
5 attacks each.
It's not bad. Put a chaplain in there on a bike, +1 to wound. Not bad.
That's pretty good.
But even just in general, just for Space Marines, strength 5, AP1, 2 damage with a chaplain again, because I think the chaplain on bike actually with this unit would be a good pick with them now.
Yeah.
And because he could also take enhancements, depending on the detachment you take as well, might be able to buff them up a bit more there.
Yeah.
They've also got they've got the bolt rifles as well on the Outrider bikes, so it's still a good load of shots that come out from shooting. So they actually have a place. It just depends, I guess, in terms of the movement around the board. They're still mounted. They're still going to have that struggle. So again, depending on detachment, they might work really well in a new Dark Angels detachment.
Yes, moving through walls with Samael,
Yeah.
and advance and shoot and charge from Samael. I think that's a really interesting combo to look at.
Yeah.
And there have been changes to Dark Angels as well for
Yes.
the Ravenwing detachment, which certainly spices these guys up.
100%.
So we'll look at that, obviously, after we've covered all the normal Marine stuff.
Reavers, though. So Reavers have had a major glow up, and I think you might be seeing them in most lists.
Yeah.
I know we've discussed it about our list putting them in, but these guys, they now have the Vanguard ability, right, for Admech. So they get to reduce your OC if you're within 3 inches of the unit by 1, and there's no minimum.
No, exactly, Jordan. It doesn't work against monsters and vehicles, but if there's somebody on an objective with OC 1 per model, and Reavers move in, then they don't even need to charge. They've taken the objective.
Yeah.
Because you have no OC.
Yeah.
And obviously, whilst you're within that range and you have 0 OC, you cannot do actions because you have 0 OC. So Reavers are very interesting. We'll have to see if the points change for them. They do have another change, of course. They've lost their aura of -1 to battle shocks and leadership tests.
Yes.
But it's kind of rolled into their inflicting battle shocks ability.
Yes.
So in engaged range, they inflict a battle shock check on units.
-1.
At -1.
The glow up on the unit, I think they have a place, but also there's more to that, isn't there, in terms of what Reavers and anything with combat knives have got. They've been given an extra AP, or AP1 now, because they had 0 AP before. So this adds into that spice, right? Now we're actually, with the Armour of Contempt change, with these units, I mean, you're not going to waste your Armour of Contempt for that thing on Reaver attacks, are you? Or scout attacks.
Yes.
You're not going to waste it on that.
It's pretty big. And Reavers have inbuilt precision as well. So with strength 4, 4 attacks, now AP1, and precision, you can go in, you can snipe guard commanders, Eldar, anything that you're realistically going to be able to hurt. And obviously, if you do happen to have any other buffs going on, then you're more likely to be able to kill someone's characters, which is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Space Marine 2's definitely had an influence on all these characters or units, I think, because they've seen how deadly a Space Marine would be with a knife. And now they're like, have an AP. Didn't realise it was that good. Didn't realise a knife was a massive sword.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for the Outriders to come to Space Marine 2 with +1 damage. And
yeah. Just running through Tyranids. Brilliant. Well, are there any other changes, universal changes to the Space Marine faction?
Yeah, Repulse Executioner, 7 capacity now. So kind of in line with the Impulsor, makes sense.
Yeah.
What's great though is you can now include this one, and you're happy to have your Blade Guard with a character, or if you're Dark Angels, your Inner Circle with a character, which is quite nice. That's quite a nice change.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just adds another layer to that vehicle, right? It means now it can actually be a transport, as well as a gun platform.
Yeah, and then the final basic unit change is that Stern Guard get reroll wounds against the Oath target.
Which is huge.
With +1 to wound, of course, if you're not playing a supplement.
Yeah, or they've just got anti-infantry 4+ on their combi bolters, so now you've got reroll wounds with that as well to guarantee, well, not guarantee, but almost guarantee dev wounds going through on your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. So reroll hits, reroll wounds, +1 to wound. It's a very interesting combo.
So overall, I mean, the units, we've had some really good glow-ups here for some of these Space Marine units. So hopefully that will see the impact on the non-codex compliant chapters actually getting a buff in terms of win rates as well. But it's not the only changes, is it, Michael?
No.
There's a lot more to go through here. So what is the next change?
So for all codex compliant chapters, first founding chapters, your named characters will get a buff. So for the Imperial Fists, Darnath Lysander, if you've got him in the army, then your Terminators are OC2 base while they're not battle shocked.
Yes, which is, but only them, no, not obviously if he led, he wouldn't get the buff. It's just that unit that gets it.
Terminator squad, Terminator assault squad. Moving on, we've got Ironfather Pharos. Heavy Intercessors go to OC3 while they're not battle shocked.
Yeah, so the Iron Hands Forge Father is going to be getting a bit of a buff there.
Yep, yeah, and with him giving them a 5 at Feel No Pain, that's quite a nice little combo. And in the Anvil Detachment, you can double their OC to 6 each.
Well,
which is quite funny.
That's pretty spicy. You're not taking that objective.
No. Shrike, Cave and Shrike, jump Assault Intercessors, get OC2. Very jealous jawed right here.
I'm not happy. How dare you do that to me?
Yakusari Khan, Outriders get to OC3.
Yeah.
So White Scars fans, this is a really good overall change for your army.
He just needs a bike now.
He just needs a bike now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we've got Pedro Cantor. So Pedro Cantor now, if you take him, your Stern Guard vets get OC2 each while not battle shocked.
Well, with their buff as well. That's really nice.
And then my man Vulcan. If you take Vulcan, which you always do if you're playing Salamander, then your Infernus Marines become OC2.
30 Infernus Marines, maybe?
I mean, their AP buff
AP
and the battle
buff.
shock buff, they are looking very
With
spicy.
Vulcan.
I think 20.
20.
20, just because you want 2 units of 5 to go in.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's looking very good. It's looking very good.
So all these first founding chapters and the second founding with the Crimson Fists as well, they're all going to be getting these buffs because they don't really have their own codexes and stuff. So having their named characters actually give out a significant buff is going to help these armies do even better on the tabletop. But the Ultramarines have got a bit of love as well.
They certainly did. So Gilliman now gets to pick 2 Author of the Codex abilities.
I don't know if this was needed.
He's pretty good already. I don't think he needed a change at all.
I don't know any of the other Primarchs to get that ability.
Well, yeah, it wasn't necessary. I don't think it was necessary. You already get to pick 2 Oath targets, so he's had a massive buff anyway, because you can definitely kill one. And you can do a stratagem for 1 less for a unit within 12. Gilliman is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully the points reflect these changes.
Yeah.
And obviously we will be doing a points video as well. This will be dropping alongside this. So after you finish this video, go and check out that video as well. But yeah, Gilliman is looking absolutely immense with these changes. Ultramarines in particular are looking absolutely immense as well. Obviously with the glow up in the previous changes, with Venturers having the Lord of Deceit ability, and all of the other characters that they've got there very, very strong. So Ultramarines looking good. Non-Codex compliant, the first founding chapter characters are getting major buffs. Space Marines in general are getting some major buffs, which is good. And obviously they had the slight change with Armor Contempt, but with AP increases, that should maybe balance it out a little bit potentially.
They'll be easier to interact with, but they'll do more damage on their less common units.
Yeah, right. Well, let's go into alphabetical order and look at the other factions. So the first one we're going to take a look at is obviously Adepta Sororitas. Now, this army has definitely been on Santa's naughty list throughout the entire, well, since their codex came out. They've had some massive changes, haven't they?
They certainly have, Jordan. One of the biggest changes is their Miracle Dice generation.
Yeah.
Which I think we all kind of could see was the issue.
A massive, massive issue. Yeah.
So now Sisters only generate Miracle Dice once at the start of the battle round, so not in every player's turn, and once per phase if one or more units, Sisters units, have died. in that phase. So if you lose 3 Sisters units in the shoot phase, you still only get 1 Miracle Dice rather than 3.
Yeah, I think overall Miracle Dice definitely needed to be brought in line. I mean, similar to what Fate Dice had with the Aeldari treatment. But this is going to be massive for a few reasons. I think, first of all, Army of Faith. Poor Stephen Box. I don't think you'll be seeing that one taken now because of this. You're not going to have the Miracle Dice really to interact with that rule anymore, are you?
No, you're not. You're not. And in addition to that, of course, we've got changes to the Triumph. So the Triumph now doesn't give you a 6. It gives you a 6 instead of the one that you roll at the start of the battle round. So instead of getting 1 at the start of the battle round and getting the Triumph 6, you now just get a 6 at the start of the battle round.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously, again, to bring that in line. But still, I mean, I still think the Triumph is really, really strong because of the buffs it gives in the auras. I think it still potentially might be almost a pivotal piece in a Sisters list. Or obviously points will determine that, and obviously what else you can fit in the list. So you may take it out for other things. But what it does, it still gives you a lot of force multiplier abilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, I hear you, Sisters players.
Yeah.
You know, there are still plenty of Sisters players that are struggling, even without these changes coming into play.
Yeah.
And I hope that you're still able to play at the tabletop and compete a bit better. There's one good change in here, because I know some people have been struggling with that detachment in particular, but there's a lot of hard-hitting nerfs.
Yes.
We'll have to see how the points go as well. Bringers of Flame have had some changes. So their detachment rule is now only within 6 inches that they get the +1 strength. The same has been applied to their Rites of Fire stratagem, where they target people on objective markers after disembarking. You have to be within 6 to get the +1 to wound.
Other stratagems have been changed as well. So there's one that's gone up to 2 CP. This was the stratagem that allowed you to disembark from a vehicle after it's been shot and shoot the target that shot your vehicle. That's gone up to 2 CP. Now, this is a weird one because I think it's a very situational stratagem. I mean, some armies, it's not even interactable. It doesn't even happen.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's kind of... Did that need to go up 2 CP?
It's a difficult one. I think it was being used to do sort of tricks where you can block people from being able to do things. But if people can make those plays, then who are we to deny them? 2 CP is still expensive, especially when you increase the cost of their other one, which is the devastating wounds on flamers.
Yeah, again, like I think what they've done to this detachment is similar to Ironstorm, right? So Ironstorm was a big problem back at the start of 10th edition, and I think now we're obviously seeing a similar situation with Bringers of Flame, but we've increased the stratagem cost on 2 of these stratagems to 2 CP. You're not going to have the CP now to be able to do all these tricks in this detachment, which, in my opinion, might make it unplayable. I mean, I don't know. Sisters players, let us know in the comments how you feel about those changes. Are you going to play Bringers of Flame? I mean, I think what we'll see on the tabletop is a pivot now to the index detachment.
Yes.
So the Hallowed Martyrs, I think we'll start to see everyone go to that detachment rather than the other 3. But Penitent Host has a change, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Yeah, you can now choose whether to use one of your doctrines or not. You're not forced into it, which is good. I think everybody can agree that's probably what they wanted.
Well, yeah.
It's a bit silly that you have to use all 3.
What detachment in the game was doing that anyway, apart from that one?
No.
All other detachments had doctrines or effects you could pick. You got to choose when you did that effect. Yeah. So I think it just brings it in line with everything else, keeps it all universal, which I think we're seeing that shift in 40k, trying to keep everything similar, right?
Yeah. So it's a difficult balance data slate for Sisters, but we can try and look at the points, and hopefully there's some stuff in there to help you out. I know Penitent Host players will be a bit happier because they can actually choose when to activate all their buffs, and we may even see more Penitent Host, and as you say, we'll definitely see more Hallowed Martyrs as well. Adeptus Custodes are next. Not a huge amount of changes here, mostly focused on the Virtus Praetors.
Okay.
So the Captain and the Virtus Praetors will go to toughness 7.
Good, so they're not the same toughness as normal infantry anymore?
No.
Right, okay, good.
And they've got an extra wound each, so 5 on Virtus Praetors and 8 on the Captain.
Okay, I think this is a good change because we weren't seeing these anyway. We have just had the Custodes detachment that came out for the Grotma's calendar, which does encourage these to be taken because there's some buffs in certain stratagems.
Move through walls.
Move through walls. So this is a good change to go alongside that. So Custodes players, if you haven't seen our overview and stuff, go check that out because we have done a video on that detachment as well as a competitive list. But these guys in this will start to see a lot more benefits as well.
Yeah, they certainly will. And they have had a massive glow up on their guns as well. The salvo launcher now is actually fitting of a custodian. So it's gained twin linked.
Nice.
And it's strength 10 now at AP3 and D6 +1 damage. So you can put some real hurt out onto vehicles, because before it was a bit sad. And the final one, Virtus Praetors, when they do their mortal wound ability, which nobody ever used because it was limited to advances, you can now do it with normal moves. So you can actually use your unit ability on Virtus Praetors if you use them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, Custodes players, would you now consider Virtus Praetors, and would you only consider them in the new detachment, the Auric Armour one, Solar Spearhead?
Solar Spearhead, that's the one, yeah. Yeah, because again, when we said with Outriders before with the Space Marine changes, they're still going to have the same trouble with terrain, moving around terrain. Are they going to be slower than most things because of the movement shenanigans you have to like pull off to get this unit around the board? That detachment gets rid of that weakness and suddenly potentially become a bit more playable.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There are obviously ways that you can normal move outside of your movement phase as well, which could be some interesting tricks you can now pull with the Virtus Praetors to trigger their mortal wound ability more than once in a turn or battle round.
Adeptus Mechanicus are next though, so no changes here in terms of the balanced data slate. They had some significant changes previously. They have just had a new detachment as well, which is pretty good, well, very good. So did you expect changes?
Not really. No, I think if we see any changes for Admech, they'll be in points. They're not going to be in the actual rules they've got. I think they've kind of ironed that out. I, for one, though, wish that their rules were a bit simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely need to be a robot to play Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, what is the next faction we're going to take a look at?
Aeldari next. No changes.
I don't think we expected any. They've had a lot already. I think they've probably exhausted the changes they could have done for this faction.
Yeah, maybe just points changes again.
But we also know that there is a codex coming for Aeldari, right? So I think it's one of those things where we just wait for the codex to come out and then...
Yes. Then we've got Astra Militarum.
Right, one of the big dogs of 40k at the minute.
Yeah, so Aquilons have had their 3-inch deep strike changed to a 6-inch.
Sure.
Lord Solar's had a significant change, so he can only order regiment and squadron units.
So he's going to go back in line with all the other characters in issue orders, right?
Exactly. So for those not in the know, that means you cannot order aeroplanes, Bulgrin, quite significantly, Ogrin, very significantly, and Ratlings, very sadly. They just don't listen.
No,
they rascals.
Can't
busy
be
making sausages.
Just making sausages.
Busy making sausages. But he can't order himself if he's on his own. He can't order any units that are just solo characters. So there are some significant impacts of that. But overall, not massive.
No, I think it's a good change, though, overall. I mean, we've seen Lord Solar in every single Astra Militarum list competitively, right? Because of what he provides for the army, the CP is massive, and then also his ability to just dish out orders left, right, and centre. Do you still think we're going to see him in every competitive list?
I think so. Obviously, we've got a codex to drop, and he's got competition for the best character on a horse.
Yes.
You know, because that guy looks pretty good.
He does look pretty good.
So, yeah, we'll see.
Absolutely. I mean, Guard players, let us know. Are you happy with that change? And people playing against Guard, are you happy with that change?
Yeah.
What's the next faction to take a look at?
Next is the beloved Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinius.
Yep.
These guys have been massively nerfed.
Yes.
No, they haven't changed. They haven't changed at all.
No, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
I don't think we expected anything, to be honest. I mean, we could wish list what we want, but there's nothing.
Well, you got buffed Outriders. You got buffed Reavers.
We have got buffed from Space Marine, which I think you'll see with other Codex compliant chapters. They've been buffed through that rather than direct buffs. But like I said, I don't think Blood Angels really needed it. They kind of sit right in the middle of the pack anyway. So
Liberator Scout Squads, though.
Liberator Scout Squads looking any of them, to be honest. I think this is the strength of Liberator, right? It makes any Space Marine look like they do in the game.
Yes, yes, they do.
So,
but only on the charge.
Only on the charge.
Yeah. And then we've got Chaos Knights. So these guys now always get their Dread and Doom abilities doom, all the time instead of waiting till turn 3 for essentially stuff that doesn't matter. So you'll have it the entire time. You just have to try and remember that it is there. Is the difficulty with Chaos Knights. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen Chaos Knights do well competitively. I mean, only with the War Dog spam list anyway, really. How is this going to impact that competitive build, do you think?
Not a lot.
Not a lot?
No, sadly, I don't think their rules not impactful enough because it is obviously relying on battle shock checks,
Sure.
and so forth. So I don't know how impactful it's going to be, but essentially, if stuff's battle shocked and it's within 12 of you, they're going to be -1 hit.
Okay.
Which is nice, and then you get +1 on the wound against battle shocked units as well. So if you can force the battle shocks more, then you're going to do well out of it. And actually, there is an enhancement change to help you with that.
Right.
So Traitor's Mark from the Index Detachment, because it used to give you all of the doom and despair.
Right. Okay.
Now what it does is in the movement phase, you can pick an enemy unit within 12 inches and force a battle shock check.
Okay, so you're going to get 5 chances to force battle shock with that character potentially, right?
Potentially.
But the other thing, I guess, we've obviously had a new detachment for Chaos Knights as well. They're maybe -1 to hit if you're within aura of a Chaos Knight. Might be significant with your cultist spam list as well. So that might actually have some play there. But overall, like you said, it's more buffing the actual detachment, right, in terms of how it's going to affect the Knight army.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot more stuff that keys off battle shock
Sure.
in the Index Detachment. And I think it's going to be difficult to decide which detachment you want to take or prefer.
Yeah.
Because I actually think the new Chaos Detachment is quite good.
Yeah, no, same, definitely. I mean, we have just reviewed that as well on the channel, so make sure you go check that out. Most of these factions, if they've had a new detachment, we have done a review on it, so make sure you go watch those videos after this one.
There is one minor change, though. So one of the enhancements has just been cleared up. And actually a lot of abilities that talk about making objective yours until it's taken off by your opponent, or sticky, as it's commonly termed, they've been reworded to have this level of control concept in them, which is essentially the same as they need to take them off you at the end of the phase.
So it doesn't mean that if you was on the objective, like if you had 10 OC on there and you walk off it, your opponent has to beat that. It means that you just have to beat the OC that the models are
currently on there.
Yeah, cool.
Exactly.
Fantastic. On to their twisted allies, the Chaos Space Marines. Now, they've had some changes as well, haven't they?
They have, yes. Yeah. So one change that we missed from earlier for Space Marines, all Predator Annihilators, wherever they happen to be, get to reroll all of their damage rolls against monsters and vehicles, rather than I think it was just the ones before.
Yes.
But yeah, reroll all damage rolls against those is very good, because you can obviously have the main las cannon shot and then the 2 sponsor las cannons.
Yeah.
So you're a bit more consistent with that output.
Which means we might see it a bit more over the autocannon version, right? The Destructor. At least it gives it a bit more play, because before it was still quite swingy, right? Yeah. Whereas now there's a bit more opportunity to potentially get better damage.
So the next one is Screaming Descent from the Dread Talons Detachment. So that was the 3-inch deep strike, and then you force a battle shock on an infantry or mounted unit within 6 inches. So that's now you land 6 inches away, and you force a battle shock on an infantry or mounted unit within 9 inches. This is actually a significant nerf, because Raptors had an aura of 6 inches for -1 to leadership and battle shock tests.
Okay, right.
So they're now not going to have that aura in play, just their detachment aura, which is sad.
So you can't double down and like
really add the -2 to battle shock, unfortunately, but it's still got some utility.
Chaos Demons are up next. Now they haven't had many change. Well, they've had one change, right? Which is with the Screamers. They've now got anti-vehicle and anti-monster 4+, and they now hit on 3s now as well, right? Will we see them on the table?
Probably.
Maybe. Yeah, it's difficult to say, right? They're just now an option.
They are now an option. That's it, right? Because Fiends and Blood Crushers have been potential competitive takes. Screamers were only really taken because of their points cost.
Yeah.
But they are beasts, so they can move through walls, and now they can actually hurt things.
They've got fly as well, right?
They've got fly as well, exactly. So maybe you will see them more. I suspect you will, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it gives you another option to other things, which is what I think Demons probably needed, because every list was very similar, which I think we've seen for quite a few armies, which is nice to see they're changing things.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you something hitty for the Tzeentch portion of the army. So if you're just playing Tzeentch, you now actually have a unit that can hit a bit harder in combat.
Right, we mentioned this earlier with Dark Angels. They've had some changes which are going to coincide with the Outrider changes and make Ravenwing a little bit better. What are the first changes to the Dark Angels detachment for Ravenwing?
Okay, so rev those engines, because all of your mounted units are going to get advance and charge and fall back and charge, in addition to the standard advance and shoot, fall back and shoot that the detachment gives you. So all of your bikes can advance, fall back, shoot, charge.
Just do what you want.
Whatever they want.
Yeah. Can't tie them up. Can't get away from them.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, it's what it needed, right? It's just definitely... Is it going to take over from other detachments? Maybe not. But at the same time, it's now an option. If you really wanted to play Ravenwing, at least you've got a buff to be able to go, well, I could take this competitively and do reasonably well with it.
Yes.
And it takes, we mentioned earlier, with the restrictions with mounted units moving around terrain, advance and charge allows you, or advance and shoot allows you to get to places you need, provided you don't roll ones, but you can still get to where you need to, right, which is a good change.
Yeah, exactly. However, there's a minor loss in that Outriders don't have an auto 6 on the advance.
True.
Which is a little bit of a loss, but let's be honest, getting +1 strength and damage and being able to every turn do that, because you can just fall back and charge, is excellent.
But the Master of the Raven Wing has had a change as well, because he had this rule built in when he led a unit of bikes. He now gives you +1 to advance and charge, as well as the ability to advance and charge in any detachment.
Exactly that. Funny enough, Samuel didn't give out fallback and do anything. He would just advance, shoot and charge.
Right.
Obviously, in this detachment, he's now going to get that. But if he ever leads anyone that can advance and charge, he's going to give them +1 to their advances and their charge rolls, which is going to make you much more reliable at being able to get to the enemy as early as possible. And this is a change that is going to affect both the Ravenwing detachment, but also the Advent detachment, the Lion's Blade Task Force.
Yeah.
And you couple this with some changes for Black Knights. So they gain devastating wounds on their melee.
Ooh, mama.
Which you might not think is significant.
That's pretty good, though.
But when they charge, they get anti-vehicle and anti-monster 4+. So now any of their 4s to wound are just going to be mortals on a monster or vehicle. They truly are going to be the company of hunters.
Yeah.
I think, very interesting.
It's very thematic as well, because obviously the Raven Wing in the lore with the Dark Angels are the knights that hunted down the monsters on Caliban. So this does have a lore built into it, but also on the tabletop is going to impact your list building quite massively, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the 2 detachments that you just mentioned. Yeah. So it's good to see that they've had a buff, but that's not all for Dark Angels, is it?
No.
The Lion, the Lord of the Dark Angels himself, has had his damage to sweep back. So he is going to be a menace. Rightfully so, to be honest. I think when he lost this and went to damage 1, a lot of people were upset because it's like, well, he's just...
You don't ever use this sweep.
Yeah,
you know.
It was pointless.
Yeah.
Whereas 16 damage to AP3 attacks, Space Marines are dead. Yeah. Especially with armor contempt change.
Well, you just use it against him.
True. Yeah.
You might be okay.
It's still amazing change. I think this is very positive for Dark Angels. And yeah, with the new detachment as well.
Yes, yeah, exactly. However, there's nothing in here about a keyword change, so he doesn't have Deathwing or Ravenwing or anything.
I think that might be a bit much, though.
So, yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's none of that, I'm afraid. Death Guard are up next. Very minor change. So the Annihilator, of course, as we said, real wounds, real damage against the monsters and vehicles. Mortarion can finally deep strike. I didn't even realise he couldn't. But apparently people were really upset about that.
Yeah, it's all the, well, I would be if my flying Demon Prince couldn't deep strike as well. But you've got it now. You can actually deep strike Mortarion. Don't know what impact this will have in terms of gameplay. We're not Death Guard experts, really.
No.
But
suspect rapid ingress with Mortarion's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, he has some good abilities in terms of what he can dish out. He is obviously a Primarch, so he's going to hit very hard. So yeah, it just offers something more to, I think, a Death Guard army, right? With obviously their new detachment, there's a new way of playing Death Guard. He doesn't really look like he fits too much into that detachment because it all centers around infantry and things like that. But in the main detachment, in the index detachment, you might see really cool plays with him with the deep strike keyword. Yeah,
exactly. It means he's not going to get shot early on because you can leave him in deep strike against certain matchups, which means you can actually get the full sort of value out of his points potentially. If you manage to play him right. Deathwatch, no changes. We don't need any. We're fine.
You've got a new index, mate. That is your change.
Yeah, that is our change. So moving swiftly on, Drukhari.
Yes.
No changes.
No changes. I don't know if they needed any, really. They've not been doing particularly bad competitively, but not been doing too amazing.
No.
I mean, obviously, there's some very skilled Drukhari players out there. It's one of those armies that's got a very high skill level.
Yes.
And if you know how to play the army right and you've got the practice in with it, you can do extremely well with Drukhari. They're quite a finessey army, aren't they?
Yeah.
But in terms of changes, I wouldn't say they really needed any. It's probably more points things that we can analyse when we come to the points changes.
Exactly that.
Right, time to strap in because we've got some big changes here for Genestealer Cult. Another menace, another one that was on the naughty list.
Yeah, there's a lot of red here.
Yeah.
So their army rule has been overhauled. There's no longer a roll to see if you get 500 points, 1,000 points.
Or 1750 against me.
1750 points of your army back.
Yeah.
That's not a thing anymore.
No.
Instead, you have resurgence points, and you get 10 at the start of a strike force game. So you have these 10 points, a new resource that you can allocate to bring units back into Cult Ambush.
I think this is a good idea, personally, because it was one of those detachment rule or army rules that it feels bad for either player. Either as the Genestealer Cult player, you weren't getting your units back, or as a player against it, you had just a ridiculous amount of models come back and it didn't feel like you was actually doing anything on the table.
No.
Whereas this, I think, just means there's a lot more guarantee to it, but at the same time, you're restricted on what you can bring back. But units have been given resource points, haven't they, or values next to their data sheets.
That's right, yeah.
So what values are we looking at here, and how does this work?
So you can still bring back aberrants. A unit of 5 will cost 5 resurgent points. A unit of 10 will cost 8 resurgence points. So if you only start with 10, then you're going to be spending 8 to bring back 10 aberrants.
Okay, well, I think that's quite reasonable. I mean, obviously, it leaves you with 2 left at the end of it if you're playing Strike Force.
Yes.
Which is pretty much all your points gone. But I think that balances it out, because if you just kept bringing back this 10-man unit of ridiculously tough aberrants, it does get quite oppressive on the tabletop, right?
Yes. So if you're going to bring back any form of hybrid or acolyte hybrid, you've got acolyte hybrids with the auto pistols, with the hand flamers, and then the metamorphs. For 5 models, it's going to cost you 2 points. For 10 models, it will cost you 4. So actually, you could bring back 2 10s and 1 5, or you could bring back, let's say, 10 aberrants and 1 5. So you've got plenty of little options there.
Or you could just bring back 5 units of 5.
Yeah.
For 10 points.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
You've got a fair bit of flexibility.
In some games, you will actually be getting more than you ever did, because you might not have rolled those dice. So I guess it balances it out that way,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Outland Jackals you can still bring back. So it's 3 points for the minimum unit and then 6 for the larger unit of Jackals. I don't think people were bringing them back anyway, but you never know, I suppose. In Outlander Claw.
Yeah, the Outland Jackals were only really seen in the Outlander Claw detachment, but there are other units. So what points have we got here for them?
So the Neophyte Hybrids, bringing 10 of them back is 3 points. And bringing back 20 is 6 points.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair. Bringing 20 models back is most of the time a stratagem, and you can only do it once per game, so I guess it makes sense there.
And finally, Pure Strain Genestealers. This was a big one with the Biosanctic Brood Surge, but bringing 5 of them back is 3 points, and bringing 10 back is 6.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
It's quite cheap, actually, for 10.
Quite cheap for 10. You can do that and bring back 2 hybrid units as well. So there's loads of... I'm seeing the combos coming in here now, right? Especially with the list building. You just want to bring back mass units. But overall, good change. Really happy with this. How do you think overall, in terms of how you're going to spend these points on the table, as a Genestealer Cult player, how would you kind of look at this new rule?
I think this is going to be an extra step in list building. I think when you're writing a Genestealer Cult list, or when GSC players write their lists, if they even stick to GSC, then they're going to be thinking, okay, I've got 10 points. I'm going to put in 1 unit of this. For when this dies, I know I've got 8 points to spend on 10 aberrants. I then can spend my 2 points on this unit when it dies. Or I'm going to have a unit of 10 metamorphs, because I know they cost this many points to bring back. So I think it's going to be a list building step, and there's going to be a few bits of calculations to work out what different combos there are for your army. And it will actually encourage, I think, some of the other detachments to be taken, because mostly what we've seen competitively is Biosanctic Brood Surge.
Yeah, or the Outland Jackal one,
or yes, the Outlander Claw.
Outlander Claw, that's it.
So now you might be looking at the Host of Ascension a bit more, or the Xenocreed detachment as well.
Do you think this is a positive change?
I think so. There's less randomness about it, and you know that you can get units back at will. Your opponent knows that you can get units back at will, so it all comes under part of that. Okay, I know you can get this back, but you still have control over which units you bring back. So there's still that skill and planning part of it, and all of that sort of sneakiness in the list building process as well.
Yeah, so it's positive for both players in terms of the experience at the tabletop. I think hopefully on the like as a Genestealer Cult player, let us know how you're feeling about this, if you're happy with this change as well, and how is this going to impact your list building? As Michael just said, it's going to have more steps now when you come to building your list. So let us know in the comments how you feel about that as well.
So there's been some cleaning up of the Cult Ambush rules. So I don't believe anything has changed. If you're a bit more experienced with the wording, then do let us know if I've missed anything here. But Cult Ambush essentially is still strategic reserves. You cannot rapid ingress. but you can arrive via Deep Strike because you can arrive via the normal strategic reserves rules. If you have Deep Strike inbuilt, that means you can Deep Strike. Now, when you do bring back these units, they have to come back at starting strength. So you can't lose a unit of, let's say, 10 aberrants and bring back 5 of them. You have to bring back a starting strength unit.
Right, okay.
Okay, so you can't like take 10, bring back 5 and kind of split the difference.
Right, sure.
Okay. Now, the rest of it's pretty much the same with these markers. They're 32 millimeters. You set up 9 inches away, and you can arrive in your opponent's reinforcement step of the next turn.
But if your opponent moves within 9 inches of the marker, it removes it straight away.
Exactly. So now we've got detachment changes. So one of these there's some Deep Strike related stuff, so we'll cover that first. So Host of Ascension did have a 3-inch Deep Strike. It's a 6-inch Deep Strike.
Okay.
Now, because a lot of this stuff's gone to 6-inch Deep Strike, ranges have changed of weaponry. So demolition charges are all 8 now, so that you can land 6 inches away and still throw them. And the Reductor Saboteurs gone to 8 as well, instead of the 6 that it was.
Yeah, sure. Just keeping it in line with the other overall arcing changes to the game.
Yeah, exactly. Outlander Claw. So they used to double their OC, which was silly.
Yeah.
They're +1 OC now.
Cool. So it's just not going to mean we're just going to have. We're still going to see the tank builds in these lists because that's what it's encouraging.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be as I'm just going to move this one truck on here and just take you off it really easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In addition, the sort of sticky objectives with Jackals has been reworded to have that level of control line in there again.
So just cleaning up wording, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So is that it for Genestealer Cult?
Not quite. So the Xeno Creed one, and this is again one of the reasons why you might be encouraged to take that. One of the enhancements that used to let you re-roll a dice for bringing the unit back has changed now to just give you 2 more resurgence points.
Cool. So another unit of hybrids can come back as part of your army rule.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you could do now 2 lots of 10 Genestealers. Or
Right,
you now open up a lot more options.
Absolutely.
And it was a decent detachment to begin with. So, yeah.
Maybe we'll see the switch to that detachment, or like you said, the Host of Ascension as well. I know there's been people taking that competitively, starting to bring that in.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see some changes there. But it's all going to be testing grounds now with Genestealer Cult players and their lists and see how they find this new change. And like you said, the list building stage now rapidly changes for these players.
Before we move on, the final change is the Kelemorph now only does his ability at 9 inches.
Yeah, I mean, the Kelemorph you've seen loads of them in the list anyway. They're very good. I think this is just a little change, a balancing change to this unit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Grey Knights is next. No changes.
Did we expect any?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
So yeah, they've obviously had a new detachment, so that might have more impact rather than changes. But I guess points would be the big, again, deciding factor for the faction.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. The new detachment leans heavily on purifiers. So we could see some interesting changes. And infantry that's not Terminate is very encouraging there. So if the points changes, then maybe Grey Knights will be fine where they are. Imperial Agents next. The Colexus, no longer 3-inch Deep Strikes. It's a 6-inch Deep Strike.
I know you said off camera that maybe this could be one that maybe could have stayed at 3.
Does it matter? It's just one thing.
I mean, we're not seeing it
It's not
anyway.
going to take objectives off you.
No.
It's not really going to do that much damage. It can land and do a bunch of battle shock stuff. Yeah, if people want to take it as a tech piece, then they pay the cost.
Yeah.
But fine, whatever. Just standardising all of the Deep Strikes is fine as well. I understand.
Yeah, I think like we said at the start, actually just making everything universal is probably better than just having exceptions.
Yeah.
But I do see the point of, well, it's just a model and it's not really seen, maybe giving it its unique.
Give it something.
Give it some flavour, might actually see it taken a bit more. So it is what it is. It's not the end. It's not breaking or ending the game, is it? So
Imperial Knights next. No changes. So we can move, again, swiftly on. Votann, Leagues of Votann. Again, no changes.
Should we move swiftly on?
Move swiftly on.
Yeah.
Necrons. So the Annihilation Legion has a change. So Destroyer Cult units in Annihilation Legion get +1 AP on their ranged attacks.
Okay, so this is going to work really well with destroyers, right?
Yes. So Locust Destroyers are going to tear things up because you'll get to AP 3, 4. Your Mythic Destructors will get to AP 2. So it's very interesting. I would love to see this for combat as well, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think actually giving Scorpet Destroyers actually a bit of play in their detachment probably would have been a bit better.
Would have been very spicy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to bring them back. They've just had a fantastic detachment drop for them, which actually Locust Destroyers are good in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a little bit. That's fine.
But Hypercrypt as well has actually had to change. The other detachment that was kind of on everyone's naughty list This one, you can now only take 2 units off the board rather than 3 if you're playing Strike Force, and obviously the numbers changed depending on the force you're playing. But Strike Force, 2 units, good change, because I think it also keeps it in line with most other detachments, right? Because, I mean, most other detachments now are leaning towards just taking 2 on and off the board, which is fine. I don't know if this really changes much in terms of the army. Obviously, it impacts your list building because you have to determine what comes on and off the board, but it's a nice change to have, right, to try and bring it back in line.
Exactly. I suspect we'll see the new detachment kick off more with the big vehicles, Doomsday Arcs, etc. And Hypercrypt we might see a bit less.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that's dear to both our hearts. Orks. So Orks have had some change. Our boys, their war has changed now, and I think this is a very positive change for Orc players because it's now done at the start of your command phase until the end of your next command phase, rather than the start of a battle round. So you're actually going to get the effects when you want it as well, right?
I think this is a mixed bag.
Okay.
Because when it was battle round, you could use it defensively. So you could trigger it and have the invuns to really take the punch out your opponent. And then you could advance and charge after they tried to kill you.
Sure.
But now that it's command phase, you have to wait till your turn to get it. And then you advance and charge. And then you have the 5-up afterwards, the 5-up invun, etc. afterwards. So it might be a bit of a loss to Orc
I think
players.
it depends on your play style, I guess, right? Because the way I'm looking at it is if I'm playing a more aggressive Orc army, I determine the tempo. It depends on if you go first or second, I guess, as well as the big thing. Because if you go first, then you've got the plays then to dictate when you get that 5-up invul, and you can move as close as possible, deal the damage. Then on your opponent's hit back, you've got the 5-up invul still in play. So I guess that's the only other side to it. But it's like you said, I guess it
comes and it goes, right? Because there's less telegraphing, which is what we're essentially saying. So if you don't declare the war, then your opponent suddenly checks all their threat ranges and just steps out of range. You can just go, cool, at any given moment in my command phase, I'm going to go war. And scream in their face. And then they'll just concede.
Please don't do that.
Don't scream in people's faces.
Don't do that.
So yeah, I think it probably is overall a positive change, but you won't be able to use it the same way defensively.
It's just a shift in mindset. This is the big thing, right? It's a shift in mindset, and you're going to have to adapt to this. But there has been some cleaning up on datasheet rules because of this change. So like the way they've worded war abilities, like Gazkul's ability, also the Bully Boys detachment ability has been reworded just to fit in with this change.
Exactly that. We do have another detachment change though. So the big Hunt. These guys can now pick a vehicle, monster, or character. They previously could only pick a character if there weren't vehicle or monsters on the table.
Are we going to see beast snaggers?
Probably not.
Probably not. But it's just nice to see a bit of love given to a detachment that's not really being taken.
Exactly.
But if you are taking it, it's a nice change.
Exactly. And they had a stratagem update as well, so they can multi-charge but still get the bonuses if one of those targets is their
Which
prey.
does open up some really interesting plays, actually, doesn't it? I mean, we've seen it in a few other detachments where you get reroll charges or benefits for charging a unit, but if you do declare another unit, you still get that benefit as long as you charge one. So there is some cool plays that you can do there, which is nice. Oh, woo!
So it would be Space Marines next, but obviously we talked about those already. As you can guess, it's the Space Wolves. No changes.
No, I just bigged it all up for nothing. No changes, but again...
sorry, one change. The Wolf Scouts have an AP on their little knives.
They've got Space Marine knives too. Yeah, overall for Space Wolves, I think they've had some good changes and some good impacts from the Space Marine Codex changes.
They have. Lost out a little bit because the Hounds of Mordecai didn't get the Reaver updates, but such is life.
Well, they're hunting Psychic, they're not hunting everyone.
Tau Empire's next, no changes.
Did we expect any?
Not really.
No. Again, there's some factions in this, again, that are just going to be impacted by points changes, and Tau are one of them.
Thousand Suns. So there aren't really any changes to Thousand Suns, just the Annihilator getting the nice little update. I kind of did expect some changes to Thousand Suns. And I think Thousand Suns players probably would have liked it as well. It's a very good detachment and is nigh unstoppable in the right hands, in the right matchup. But actually, some nerfs to the detachment, the index detachment, probably could have been done in order to bring the points costs of the other units down. Because I think, you know, we've filmed the Thousand Suns Advent detachment, and it's very clearly not competing at all with the old one. I think that's because the units are so expensive that a detachment that is simply worse is not going to be viable.
No, absolutely. I think, again, Thousand Sons, unfortunately, are paying for the sins of what they've been doing with this index detachment, right? So there's not going to be any buffs for them because they've been kind of one of the best armies in the game in the right hands.
Yeah, exactly. But it would have been nice to see some kind of change, maybe, or fix to Cabal rituals or Cabal points, something like that, or some tweaks to the detachment.
Yeah.
Sadly, nothing. You're just going to still have to play with expensive units.
Yeah.
And probably still do well.
Okay, my mortal enemies are up next, the Tyranids.
The Tyranids. Very excited.
Yes, I know you would be, because there are some good changes here, and some positive ones for the faction.
Yeah.
One thing just to get off the bat, so Trigons, they've just been brought in line, so they do 6-inch deep strike rather than a 3-inch. You probably don't see them because of the base size.
Nah.
So it's a bad change for them in that regard. But other changes, let's go on to positive changes. The Assimilation Swarm.
Yes, so the Assimilation, it's one of my favourite detachments, even though I can't say it apparently.
Yeah.
So the Assimilation Swarm, you can regenerate units now without any requirement for objective markers that you control. So wherever your harvesters are, you can now regenerate a unit within 6 inches. If you pick one model, so like a monster or something, you can heal D3+1 as well. Before, it was bring back a whole infantry model, or 3 endless multitude, or heal D3 on one model.
Right.
And it's like, why would you ever do the D3? But D3+1 is a bit more reliable.
Yeah.
So you might do it now, especially since the Norn Assimilator is a harvester now.
So the Assimilator one is the combat-orientated Norn, not the 4+ invulnerable save Norn. I know everyone was just screaming out their minds then with the healing that one. But this does still have the ability to get the 5 fulfillment pain on an objective or reroll hits and wounds against one unit that it picks.
Yes.
It's still good that it's got the keyword because you was never seeing this option. This was just not an option for Tyranids because you had a 4 pinball version.
Yes.
Now it's got a detachment where it actually sees play, and D3+1 wounds on that is good.
It gets even spicier, Jordan.
Yeah.
Because there is stratagem for 2 CP to give a harvester Feel No Pain 4 up on an objective they control.
Oh, no.
So we don't need a 4 up in one.
You've got 4 Feel No Pain.
You can have a 4 Feel No Pain on this bad boy.
I'm glad that's 2 CP.
Yeah, just take a Hive Tyrant as 1 CP.
No.
Anyway.
Kill the Hive Tyrant.
So this is huge, absolutely huge. You also can get lethal hits and crits on 5s for harvesters. Nice. There's a lot of cool little things you can do. And I actually dare to say, maybe even triple Norn.
That would be cool to see.
Could be quite good.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that because the other one can feel very, for certain armies, difficult to get through, especially when it gets the, because a 4 pinball on a vehicle or monster combined with a Feel No Pain as well as their stats can be quite oppressive.
Yeah.
But actually this one doesn't have that layer of durability, but like you said, you could. But it still has the ability to just do damage. And seeing this detachment actually do some damage on the tabletop would be awesome.
Yes, yeah. There's other changes I would love to see with Tyranids, but such is life. But that is fantastic, that's awesome. So we might actually see Assimilation Swarm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it for Tyranids. But World Eaters are the last army to go over now.
Yeah.
So they've only had one slight change, which is with the Demon Prince, right, with his 4 invul or the invul buffing aura it has.
Yes, that's right. So in order to get the 4-up invuln from the Demon Prince, you need to have a 5-up invuln base rather than just an invuln.
Yeah.
So what was previously happening is people would take Jackals, they would go to ground to get 6-up invuln, and then suddenly they'd have a 4-up invuln out of nowhere because of the Demon Prince, which is obviously not intended. So that has been changed, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, I think basically you're buffing 8-bound. That's what you're doing here, right? And I think it's nice to see that that's its purpose rather than, like you said, the Jackal spam. Like the more we
still give out the 5-up invuln.
Yeah, exactly. You still give out a 5-up invul, but you're not getting a 4-up invul, which is good, especially when you slap on Feel No Pains, which I think is such a insane combo in any army. If you can get Feel No Pains and invulnerable saves, it's really good.
Yeah. There is one more change, but it's not really significant. Well, it could be significant, actually. It's the Predator Annihilator, getting the reroll wounds, the reroll damage against monsters and vehicles. And actually in World Eaters, maybe that's impactful.
Maybe it is.
You struggle to deal with those tougher targets, right?
I think as well, World Eaters, something they're always going to struggle with is range, right? They're not a ranged army, but actually, from a combat player's perspective, sometimes having one unit that can just deal range, damage at range and really far as well with that.
Yeah.
This might be a tool that you might look at adding now to your World Eaters. Yeah. It depends on points, because obviously I don't know how this is shaping out with the points for the rest of the game for all Predators.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they definitely have a place.
Exactly.
Now.
But yeah, people have tried Forge Fiends in the past. People have tried Predator Destructors. Maybe the Annihilator's time is nigh.
Yeah.
But that is it for the balanced data slate changes, Jordan.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes. Overall, how are we feeling about the changes?
Great. Yeah, I think we've had a lot more consistency built in. Some of the less interactive parts of the game are gone. I do feel a little bit sad about the 3-inch deep strike, but getting rid of it takes a bit of mental load off players that are trying to screen it. So I understand that's fine. And it also stops people having to balance whether an army has access to a 3-inch deep strike, because that tended to be the win percentage.
Or your deep strike denial auras.
Exactly.
Like constantly trying to stick them in because someone had a 3-inch deep strike, or that was the meta at the time.
Yeah.
Because everyone could just 3-inch deep strike. Well, 12-inch, it's still going to be useful, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, cool, it's just not as on your radar, I guess, when you're building a list.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one thing I would say that I'm a bit sad about is the armor contempt. Because I think this is going to, I think we need to see this in play.
Yeah.
Before we make judgment calls on whether or not that's a good change or not. Just because, obviously, we use it all the time. It's something that's kind of built into your play style. But how does it now work when you're playing this? Like, when do you play it? All this sort of stuff comes into it now, right?
Agreed. Yeah, like I said, it would have been great to see it not work for 2-up saves.
Yes.
Or maybe for a certain toughness value as well. But the 3-up save toughness 4 Marines are going to really suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with the damage increase across the board for Marine factions, if you're playing into mirror matchups, it's going to be very strong. But some positive changes, though. Space Marines, really happy for most Space Marine factions. It's going to be really good to see that. Ultramarines, I think, might be a bit too strong.
Yeah, we'll have to see about that. Yeah.
They might be like the big baddies now. Other than that, Necrons hasn't impacted what we're all thinking will be the new scary list with the new detachment. But so good to see that they're still trying to balance the rest of the codex.
Yeah.
Other than that?
Yeah, I mean, so much of this is going to depend on points as well.
Yeah.
Which obviously we will be covering as well in depth. And then maybe an idea when we've got both of those in our heads, we can give you another more in-depth perspective, especially on one of our members' lounges.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Michael, thank you so much for running through this with me. And guys, let us know in the comments how you're feeling about the balanced data slate for December. And as Michael said, thank you to Games Workshop for providing us access to the balanced data slate to bring you this video and give you all the information that is in this document. If you want to download the document, the link will be in the description. Make sure you like and subscribe on this video, and we'll see you very soon.